It was supposed to be a dream getaway, a picture-perfect love story unfolding against the breathtaking beauty of Morocco. The narrow, winding streets of Marrakesh, filled with vibrant souks and the scent of exotic spices, promised adventure. The golden glow of lantern-lit courtyards whispered romance. The air buzzed with the hum of street musicians, the clatter of merchants showcasing their wares, and the occasional call of an eager vendor luring tourists into their colorful shops. Patrice and Malcolm Robinson, a glamorous Jamaican couple, had landed in this magical city with hopes of rekindling their bond. To the world, they were the epitome of modern love, stylish, affluent, and madly in love. Every photo they posted dripped with luxury, every video told a story of passion, adventure, and devotion. Their thousands of followers lived vicariously through their travels, swooning over romantic dinner dates, candlelit rooftop lounges, and private poolside moments framed by the backdrop of ancient Moroccan beauty. But social media is a mirage. A highlight reel. It captures smiles, not silences. Passion, not pain. And behind the perfectly curated images lay a truth neither of them dared to confront. The first night, everything felt like a dream. Their suite at the luxurious Royal Mansour was a masterpiece of Moroccan artistry, plush velvet cushions, intricate mosaic walls, a private plunge pool shimmering beneath the soft glow of lanterns. Patrice twirled in the dim light, her silk dress floating around her as she turned to Malcolm with a playful smile. "Can you believe we're really here?" she whispered, stretching out her arms as if embracing the moment. Malcolm chuckled, pulling her in for a kiss. "Only the best for us, baby." To an outsider, it was perfection. But in the silence of the night, when the cameras were off and the world wasn't watching, the cracks in their paradise began to show. Malcolm spent a lot of time on his phone, scrolling through messages, replying with short, almost mechanical responses. Patrice noticed. She always noticed. But she had learned to suppress the questions that lingered on the tip of her tongue. It wasn't the first time she had seen him like this, distant, detached, as if his mind was elsewhere. The second night, they dined at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the bustling Jama Elfnar Square. The air was thick with the scent of grilled meats and sweet mint tea. Patrice laughed, sipped her wine, and leaned into Malcolm as they posed for yet another perfect couple picture. But behind the glimmer of candlelight, her heart pounded with unease. "Malcolm," she finally said, her voice light but probing. "You've been on your phone a lot. Something important back home?" He didn't meet her gaze. "Just business." She forced a smile, swirling the wine in her glass. Business. The same word he had used a dozen times before. It was always business. The tension simmered beneath the surface, but neither of them addressed it. Instead, they went through the motions, exploring the city hand in hand, posing in front of the ornate arches of palaces, whispering sweet nothings for the camera. But that night, as Patrice stepped out of the shower, humming softly to herself, she caught sight of Malcolm's phone buzzing on the bedside table. A name flashed across the screen, Sasha Redheart. The blood drained from her face. A chill ran down her spine as she reached for the phone, her fingers trembling. She had suspected, but seeing it spelled out in front of her was something else entirely. She tapped the screen hesitantly, scrolling through the messages. "I miss you. When will you tell her? I can't wait to see you again." Each word was a dagger, carving deep into her chest. This wasn't a meaningless flirtation. This was something real. Something planned. The room around her blurred, the soft glow of lanterns now suffocating. She clenched her jaw, swallowing back the lump in her throat. The sound of running water from the bathroom told her she had mere seconds before Malcolm returned. Quickly, she put the phone back where she found it and forced herself to breathe. When Malcolm emerged, running a towel over his damp hair, he caught sight of her sitting stiffly on the edge of the bed. "Everything okay?" Patrice looked up, her eyes searching his face for any hint of guilt. But he was good at this. Too good. "Yeah," she said softly, plastering on a smile. "Just tired." Malcolm leaned down, kissing the top of her head. "Get some rest, baby. We have a big day tomorrow." Patrice nodded, watching as he climbed into bed, completely unaware that his world was about to crumble. The walls of their perfect fairy tale had begun to crack, and now, the only question that remained was, how much longer until they collapsed completely? And before their trip was over, one of them would be dead. On social media, Patrice and Malcolm had it all. Success. Charm. A seemingly unbreakable love. Malcolm, a charismatic entrepreneur. Patrice, an elegant influencer. They traveled in style, dined at the finest restaurants, shared their lives with an adoring audience. Every post told the same story, one of luxury, devotion, and perfection. But pictures can lie. Beneath the dazzling smiles and curated perfection, cracks had already begun to show. Small, at first. Almost unnoticeable. Malcolm's distracted glances. Late-night phone calls in hushed tones. The way he angled his screen away from her. Something wasn't right. Patrice could feel it. Was she imagining things? Or was Malcolm hiding something? The seed of doubt had been planted. It started as an uneasy feeling, a slight twinge in her chest whenever she caught him glancing at his phone mid-conversation. She dismissed it at first. Told herself she was overthinking. After all, Malcolm had always been busy. His business required him to stay connected. But then came the nights when he would excuse himself, stepping onto the balcony or into the bathroom, voice hushed, tone clipped. The messages he would send, fingers moving swiftly over the screen before he'd turn the phone face down on the table, as if to erase any trace of them. Patrice tried to ignore it. She told herself that if she searched for problems, she would find them. And wasn't their love worth more than a few paranoid thoughts? But suspicion, once awakened, is a hungry thing. It does not sleep. It gnaws at the mind, whispering worst-case scenarios in the dead of night. One evening, while waiting for Malcolm to finish a business call, Patrice scrolled through the comments on their latest post. A sunset dinner on the beach. They looked radiant. The comments were filled with admiration, with people calling them goals. And yet, even as she read them, the words felt hollow. If only they knew. If only they could see beyond the camera lens. A voice from the balcony caught her attention. Malcolm's. I told you, not now. I can't talk. A pause. No, I don't know when. Another pause. Then a sigh. I'll fix it. Just trust me. Patrice sat frozen, her grip tightening around her phone. Who was he talking to? And why did it sound so much like a secret? That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay next to Malcolm, his even breaths filling the space beside her, while her mind spun in circles. She wanted to trust him. She wanted to believe in the love they had built, in the life they had created. But doubt had taken root, and it would not let go. The next morning, she decided to test him. It was subtle, almost innocent. A casual question over breakfast. Who was that on the phone last night? Malcolm didn't look up from his plate. Just work. Patrice nodded, watching him carefully. Sounded serious. His fork paused mid-air before he set it down and met her gaze. It was nothing, Patrice. Just business. There it was again. That word. Business. A shield he wielded whenever she got too close to something he didn't want her to see. Patrice wasn't sure when she made the decision to check his phone. Maybe it had been building for weeks. Maybe it was the accumulation of every half-truth, every averted gaze, every time he pulled away just a little too soon. She waited until he was in the shower. The sound of running water muffled the pounding of her heart as she reached for his phone. Locked. Of course. But then, as if the universe itself wanted to reveal the truth, a message lit up the screen. Sasha Redheart. Patrice's stomach dropped. The name alone felt like an omen. Her fingers trembled as she stared at the preview of the message. I miss you. Can't wait to see you again. Patrice felt the air leave her lungs. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. The shower turned off. Panic set in. She placed the phone back where she found it and forced herself to breathe. She couldn't let him see. Not yet. She needed to be sure. She needed proof. That evening, she was quiet. Too quiet. Malcolm noticed. You okay? He asked as they walked hand in hand through the Medina, the sounds of the bustling market around them. She forced a smile. Yeah. Just tired. He accepted her answer without question. But Patrice knew the truth. She wasn't just tired. She was preparing for war. Then, she found the messages. A name, Sasha Redheart. Passionate words. Promises of a future that didn't include Patrice. Not just a meaningless fling. A full betrayal. Malcolm wasn't just cheating, he was leaving her. Betrayal has a sound. It's the silence that follows the moment everything you knew shatters into pieces. It's the pounding of blood in your ears. The sharp intake of breath. The tightening of your chest as your world collapses. Love is supposed to be safe. A refuge. A sanctuary. But what happens when the person you trust the most becomes your greatest enemy? Patrice confronted him. Malcolm didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He didn't even try to explain. His voice, once warm and reassuring, was now cold, detached. It's over, he said. A simple declaration. A death sentence to everything they had built. To him, it was nothing more than a chapter closing. To Patrice, it was the end of everything she had ever believed in. And something inside her broke. Betrayal. Humiliation. Rage. The weight of a love that had turned to poison. A storm brewing inside her, uncontrollable. And when love turns to despair, desperation is never far behind. The air in the hotel room felt suffocating, thick with words unspoken and emotions too raw to name. Patrice stood motionless, phone clutched tightly in her trembling hands. The screen still displayed the damning words, Sasha Redheart. Passion. Plans. A future without her. Her breath hitched. The walls of the luxury suite seemed to close in. Outside, the night hummed with the distant chatter of tourists, the melody of Moroccan street musicians drifting through the open balcony door. But inside, in the cold glow of the bedside lamp, there was only silence. Malcolm sat on the edge of the bed, his fingers idly scrolling through his own phone, completely unfazed. As if her pain didn't matter. As if she didn't matter. He had said it so easily. It's over. As if the years they had spent together were nothing. As if she was nothing. That's it. Patrice's voice wavered. She hated the way it sounded, small, broken, weak. Malcolm sighed, finally looking up. His expression held no remorse, no regret, just impatience. What do you want me to say, Patrice? It's done. Something inside her twisted, a searing pain she had never felt before. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, to make him feel even an ounce of the devastation crashing through her. You lied to me. Every single day, you lied to me. Her fingers dug into her palms. Was any of it real? Malcolm ran a hand down his face, exasperated. Patrice, don't do this. Don't do this. As if she was the one ruining everything. As if she was the problem. The walls vibrated with the weight of emotions she could no longer contain. Images of their past flashed before her, the late-night whispers, the laughter that once felt effortless, the whispered promises of forever. Lies. Every single one of them. Her mind spiraled. The betrayal wasn't just in the messages. It was in every moment he had touched her while thinking of someone else. In every night he had laid beside her, plotting his exit. You don't even care, do you? The realization cut deeper than she expected. Malcolm stood, stretching, yawning. Yawning. I don't know what you want from me, Patrice. I'm done. It's over. Move on. Move on. Patrice let out a strangled laugh, but there was no humor in it. Move on? Like she was disposable? Like she hadn't poured her entire life into this relationship, into this man who now treated her like an inconvenience? Something dark bloomed inside her, thick and suffocating, curling around her ribs like a vice. You don't get to decide when this is over, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. Actually, I do. And I just did. He grabbed his wallet, checking his reflection in the mirror, fixing his collar as if this were just another ordinary evening. Patrice stared at him, at the man she thought she knew, the man she had loved so blindly. And for the first time, she saw him for what he truly was. A stranger. And strangers had no place in her heart. Not anymore. The weight of betrayal settled deep into her bones, twisting into something unrecognizable. Something she had never felt before. Rage. Desperation. A storm brewing inside her, ready to unleash its fury. Malcolm turned to leave. And in that moment, Patrice made a decision that would change everything. That night, as Malcolm slept, Patrice made her decision. One strike. Then another. And another. Silence. The deed was done. But Patrice wasn't just a woman scorned, she was a woman who knew how to survive. And survival meant deception. A violent robbery. A struggle. Patrice, the grieving widow left behind in the chaos. But lies, like blood, have a way of leaving stains. The details didn't add up. No forced entry. No signs of a struggle. Her injuries, precise, almost, staged. And then, the fatal flaw, the hotel surveillance cameras. Under pressure, her story unraveled. The forensic evidence told the truth. The murder weapon, wiped clean, but not well enough. The blood spatter, inconsistent with her claims. And the ultimate betrayal? Malcolm's own phone, recording his final moments before death. The motive was clear. The evidence, damning. Patrice was arrested, her carefully curated world crumbling for the world to see. The trial was swift. Prosecutors painted her as a woman consumed by jealousy, driven to murder by fear of being replaced. The defense argued it was a crime of passion, a moment of emotional collapse. But the truth was unyielding. Patrice Robinson, once a symbol of romance, now a prisoner of her own choices. Malcolm Robinson, a man whose infidelity cost him his life. And Sasha Redheart, the woman unknowingly at the center of a storm that turned deadly. Patrice sat in the dimly lit interrogation room, her hands trembling as she traced invisible patterns on the cold steel table. The weight of her actions pressed against her chest like a crushing boulder. The detectives had been relentless. They picked apart her story, piece by piece, exposing every inconsistency like vultures circling a wounded animal. She could still hear the echoes of their voices. No signs of forced entry, Patrice. You expect us to believe a violent robbery left everything intact, except for Malcolm? She had rehearsed her tears, practiced the stammer in her voice, but nothing could prepare her for the relentless assault of evidence. The surveillance footage had been her undoing. The hotel's hallway cameras told a story she couldn't rewrite. Malcolm entered the suite at 11:32 p.m. No one else came or went. At 2:15 a.m., the camera caught Patrice leaving the room, her face pale, her hands shaking. The timestamp sealed her fate. The interrogator had played the clip on a loop, letting her watch herself walk to the front desk, her clothes immaculate, no sign of a struggle, no trace of an intruder. And then, the final blow. We recovered footage from Malcolm's phone. She hadn't expected that. The words made her blood run cold. The recording was brief, but it was enough. A blurry shot of the hotel ceiling. Malcolm's voice, slurred from sleep. Then a sudden gasp. A choked sound of pain. A soft thud. Silence. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the screen. She could hear herself in the background. The frantic rustle of fabric. The click of the bathroom door. She had thought she erased everything. She had been meticulous. Careful. But she had missed this. The courtroom was silent as the prosecution presented its case. Every detail of the murder laid bare. The motive, clear as day. The betrayal. The rage. The desperate attempt to cover her tracks. The defense tried to salvage what they could. They painted her as a woman driven to madness, a victim of emotional turmoil. They argued that Malcolm's infidelity had sent her spiraling, that she had acted in a moment of unthinkable despair. But the jury wasn't swayed. The evidence was overwhelming. The surveillance footage. The forensic inconsistencies. The final, damning recording from Malcolm's own phone. When the verdict was read, Patrice felt the room tilt. The words rang in her ears. Guilty. Her empire had crumbled. Her followers, once captivated by her picture-perfect life, now watched in horror as she was led away in handcuffs. The woman they had admired, envied, adored, now reduced to a cautionary tale. Malcolm was gone. Sasha Redheart would move on. And Patrice Robinson would spend the rest of her days trapped in the prison of her own making. A love story turned nightmare. A dream getaway turned crime scene. A perfect life shattered beyond repair. And in the end, the question remained. Was it worth it? The gavel came down with a resounding crack, silencing the murmurs that had been rippling through the courtroom. The judge's expression was impassive, a stark contrast to the raw emotions that had filled the air for weeks. Journalists scribbled frantically, cameras flashed, and the world held its breath. The verdict had been reached. Patrice Robinson sat motionless, her perfectly composed exterior betraying nothing. But inside? Inside, a storm raged. This was not how it was supposed to end. The jury had deliberated for hours, dissecting the evidence piece by piece. The surveillance footage. The blood spatter. The murder weapon. The damning messages. Every lie she had told had come back to haunt her, creeping through the cracks of her carefully crafted story. Her defense team had fought hard. They painted her as a woman drowning in heartbreak, a victim of love's cruelest betrayal. A moment of passion turned deadly, a tragic accident rather than premeditated murder. But the prosecution had been relentless, their narrative cutting through every illusion like a blade. Patrice wasn't just a woman scorned. She was a woman who had planned, who had waited, who had acted with precision. And that was all the jury needed to hear. The words rang through the courtroom, final and absolute. Guilty. A single syllable, but it echoed through her like a gunshot. Patrice barely flinched. She had prepared for this moment, steeled herself for the weight of it. And yet, no amount of preparation could stop the ice that spread through her veins as the world around her erupted. Gasps. Cries. The sound of someone sobbing. Was it her mother? The judge's voice droned on, listing out the charges, the sentence, the years she would spend behind bars. But all of it faded into a dull hum. Because Patrice was no longer in the courtroom. She was in Marrakesh, back in that hotel room, standing over Malcolm's lifeless body, her hands trembling, her breath ragged. The room had been so silent. No more laughter, no more whispered conversations, no more careless promises of forever. Just silence and the weight of a choice she could never take back. Her mind raced back further. To the discovery of those messages. To the feeling of her heart splintering as she read Malcolm's words to Sasha Redheart. The love, the longing, the plans for a life without her. Was it rage that had fueled her that night? Desperation? Heartache? Or had it been something deeper, a need to reclaim power over a life that was slipping through her fingers? A hand on her shoulder jolted her back to the present. The bailiff. Time to go. As she was led away, the eyes of the world bore into her, judging, dissecting, condemning. The cameras would broadcast this moment to millions. A woman who had once lived in the glow of admiration now swallowed by scandal, her name forever etched in the annals of infamy. Malcolm was dead. Sasha Redheart had disappeared from the public eye, her name forever tied to a tragedy she had never seen coming. And Patrice? Patrice was left with nothing but time. Time to sit with the echoes of that fateful night. Time to ask herself the questions that would never have answers. Was this justice? Or was it just another tragic chapter in a cycle of love and destruction? Could things have ended differently? And in the end, was it worth it?